Hello, and welcome to 80s TV Ladies. I'm Sharon Johnson.
And I'm Susan Lambert-Haddam.
Let's get started. We are so joyful to be continuing our deep dive into Cagney and Lacey, the female-driven buddy police show that ran from 1982 to 1988.
And it proved that women could be buddies under pressure.
A few episodes ago, we talked to the creator, Barney Rosenzweig, then Tyne Daly, and now the incredible 80s TV lady, Christine Cagney herself, actress Sharon Gless.
Miss Gless is a Multi-Emmy and Golden Globe winning screen and stage actress.
She may be best known for her role as Cagney in the 80s TV ladies' phenomenal show, Cagney and Lacey, but she also played the title role in the Trials of Rosie O'Neill. She also played the dirty-mouthed loving mom to a gay son, Debbie Novotny, for 5 years in the daring American version of Queer as Folk on Showtime. And then a tougher but still loving mother, Madeline Weston, on Burn Notice.
As the last contract player at Universal Studios, Gless also guest starred and co-starred in many of TV's top-rated series of the 70s and 80s, including The Rockford Files, The Bob Newhart Show, Marcus Welby, MD, House Calls, and Switch.
Miss Gless has also starred on the stage in major theatrical productions, including Misery, Chapter 2, and Round-Heeled Woman.
And she is an author as well. Gless's award-winning autobiography, Apparently There Were Complaints, was published by Simon & Schuster in December 2021. Apple Audiobooks named it a must-listen. Publishers Weekly called Gless a masterful storyteller, and I call it a fantastically fun read.
She's been married to Barney Rosenzweig, the executive producer of Cagney and Lacey, and a guest of this show since 1991.
Welcome, Sharon. Thank you so much for joining us at 80s TV Ladies.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and for asking me.
How are you doing today?
Doing very well. I'm very happy. I've been looking forward to doing this with you. And I'm very blessed. I'm physically well, and I've had a wonderful career and intend to continue to do so. Somebody did an article on me. You know, I've been doing this book and I'm doing interviews, and this man interviewed me and he said, "Do you know that you've done more television series? You've done 9 television series. You and Cloris Leachman, the only 2 women to do 9." I said, "Wow, I didn't know that." And he said, "Yeah, the only person to beat you out was Betty White. She's done 10."
She's done 10.
I said, "Well, I'm going to have to match Betty." Well, Betty has gone to the great, MCA in the sky. But I still have one more in me. So I don't intend to beat Betty, but I'd like to match her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to see that.
If I had to beat Betty, that means the next one I tried wouldn't work, right? And then I'd have to do another one. So I'm happy to just match her.
You don't want to jinx anything.
No.
That actually brings me to a question I had. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like moving to Florida has really not had an impact on your ability to continue working in television and working in general. Is that correct?
Correct. I've been very blessed. I moved to Florida because that's where my husband wanted to go. He wanted to retire, and he had a belief that you cannot retire from Hollywood and live in Hollywood. So, okay. So we moved to Florida, and he's very, very happy. And I'm married to a man. If he's happy, everybody's happy. You know, kind of it. But whenever I got an opportunity to work, he's the first feminist I ever met. So since I moved to Florida, I think I've done 3 series. So I was just free to go and travel and just continue to be an actress, regardless of where I live.
Right. But I want to go back to the first feminist you ever met. Was it really Barney?
He's Barney Rosenzweig. Barney approached me to do this series called Cagney and Lacey. And I didn't realize he was a feminist. My background was I'd been under contract to Universal for many years, 10 years. And in that day and age, even though Gloria Steinem had been out there swinging that bat, I was not made politically aware. I was not aware of all the work that Gloria was doing while I was under contract to Universal. And when Barney asked me to do this series, I didn't want to do it. Not because it was two women. I didn't want to do another cop show. Anyway, he's hiring me to do Cagney Lacey. I started learning. I didn't realize the impact that this show was having. I knew it was about two women. I'd never starred in a show with a woman before. It had always been with men. And what I was trying to say is I never felt there was nobody I was in competition with. I didn't have that driver. I'd fight for the female because I was like the only female. I was the only one wearing a dress. So I always thought I got what I needed and what I wanted. It never occurred to me to ask what the men were making at Universal. But it wasn't until I joined Cagney Lacey and I became aware of really what a shitty deal we were getting. Again, I was raised only with brothers. I don't know how to explain that I was a newcomer in fighting for women's rights. But once I hooked on to Cagney Lacey and I met this Barney Rosenzweig, who was the first feminist I'd ever met, I learned, and I had the great pleasure and the great honor to play Chris Cagney and to change lives for other women. Believe me, ladies, I did not know I was doing that when I was shooting Cagney Lacey.
But you were.
Apparently it was. But do you know, I didn't have first of all, the ego to assume I was changing women's lives. I was just doing a really cool character. Probably, I still think, you don't mind me saying, I still think Christine Cagney's one of the great female characters ever written for television, because she was so flawed. So flawed. And had
so many layers, and flawed at a time, again, that women just weren't given that many layers.
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, I loved it. I had never been offended by any role I'd been given to play. I never felt any of the women I played were less than, were treated less than, were boring, were not interesting. But my mind wasn't like that. I wasn't in the fighting mode when I first became an actress. I was just so grateful to be working. I'd do anything they'd give me. And I succeeded because I had a very powerful woman behind me, Minnie James,
yes,
who was the head of talent at Universal Studios. The reason for my success is a woman. And the reason for the longevity of my career is because of a man in Barney Rosenzweig. But who put me on that map was a woman who was the first female vice president of MCA. And she saw something in me. She believed in me. I was green. I didn't know anything except that I knew I wanted to be an actress. And she believed me. Minnie James' background was that she and her business partner, Eleanor Kilgallen, were the first females to have a talent agency in New York City. And their first clients were Grace Kelly and Warren Beatty. Hi.
Wow.
These women, they were young girls, and they started their own talent agency, and they had these two really cool actors. And Lou Wasserman, he headed MCA, he decided to buy Universal. So, I mean, he couldn't be an agent with MCA anymore. And Lou Wasserman bought out Minnie James and her partner.
Okay.
It's the first women ever to have a talent agency. So Monique James and Eleanor Kilgallen became the first two female vice presidents of MCA. Huge. Then MCA bought Universal Studios, and agents were no longer allowed at MCA to function as agents. The government came and locked all their files because you couldn't own a studio and also use your clients.
Mm-hmm. Right.
See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So Monique James and Eleanor Kilgallen became the first two female vice presidents of MCA Universal. Monique was head of talent on the West Coast. Eleanor was head of talent on the East Coast.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And Eleanor also had Toronto and England as her markets to pick young actors. But Monique picked me. And I know I'm talking too much for you.
No, this is really fascinating because we don't talk about these women that were so groundbreaking enough. That's one of the reasons we started the show. And so I'm very curious about Monique.
Thank you, because you wouldn't want to sit here and talk to me because I'd have nothing to tell you if it had not been for her.
And you were how old when you were the last contract player at Universal?
Very last one to leave the lot. Yeah, I was, they signed me when I was 26 and they made me lie about my age. I have one of these Irish monks. I was never a great beauty, but I passed as a kid, And so she said, don't tell anybody how old you are. I said, okay. So I worked for 10 years and she groomed me and I learned everything she taught me. I know it's in the book, but I'm repeating it because it's in your show. When you're a contract player, you're taken into a screening room, a big screening room, the days when they had huge screens. Young people don't even know what that means, but they had big, huge, enormous screens, and you'd be forced to sit there and watch your film. And she talked to some man, it's like kind of a movie. She talked to some man in the projection room and say, please run Miss Gless's film. Or it's got to read Miss Gless in front of me, in front of other people. She'd call me Miss Gless. And he'd run my film and I'd have to look at it. And she'd tell me what I was doing wrong. And she taught me how to do this thing called acting.
That is amazing. That is so hard for actors to watch themselves, I think, often.
I happen to be an actor who never watches herself. I never watch myself.
But you were forced to early on.
I had to because one of my obligations and to learn from her. It's something even simple. The first time she said, see that thing you're doing with your mouth? I said, yes. She says, stop doing it. Start out that simply. And then she started teaching me to listen. She said, you're not listening. She said, you're waiting to say your line. I said, yeah, I'm waiting to say my line. She said, I know that. And she said, Sharon, if you learn to really listen to your fellow partner, listen to what he's saying. Your face will change because your face does that. And your face will change as you're listening, and they're going to cut to you instead of the person who's talking. And the truth is, that's when acting became fun for me. I started relaxing, really listening to what somebody was saying. And they'd either, what they said may hurt me, or they may make me laugh, or anything. I was able to drop the fear as long as I was locked into that fellow actor. So, sorry.
No, it's fantastic.
Do you know if there were any other actors before you that she kind of took under her wing a little bit and helped them make the transition that she helped you make to understanding, how to basically act on film the way that she taught you?
Well, I know Susan Clark. I don't know if you remember Susan Clark.
Yes.
She was very big in those days. And she was just a theater actress, darling. And much more training, obviously, than I ever had. She was theater. But Monique believed in her, saw her. And I don't know if Monique trained her, because I think she came in trained. But
isn't theater acting different in a lot of ways than film acting in terms of,
Well, I always joke, in theater acting, you talk louder. I guess there is. Tyne Daly, primarily, was her background is theater, and her father's, and she went into the family business. She went into acting because her parents were actors. And I think Tyne considers herself a theater actor. If I had to discern where I excelled, I still call myself a film actor. It's a different skill, or they like to be better on film than they did on the stage. There's just a place where you land. And as long as somebody will listen to me or cry or laugh or I make them feel, whatever avenue that is, I'd love to do it.
I think that's really
to answer your question.
Mm-hmm. No, you
Sharon
are
is a very skilled stage actor, and that is her first love. However skilled maybe, I'm more comfortable in front of the camera. One camera. I don't like those 4-camera sitcoms.
Oh, interesting.
I like my relationship with the lens.
Oh, that's
I
really.
pretend it's not there.
I do know that Monique James, in the article I read about her, is also credited with discovering Robert Redford, Sharon. Other Sharon. Both Sharons.
How do you know that?
It was in an obituary that I read about her, that they said credited with discovering you, Robert Redford, and Warren Beatty.
They called her the star maker.
Yes.
She was very formidable. She frightened me, but she was wonderful. I loved her dearly.
And so she was your boss at
She was my boss. She was my boss at Universal. She's the reason I had a chance to go to Universal. But then when my time was up at Universal, they were closing the contract system. And I was the last one to leave. And they, of course, asked her to stay on at Universal and do some other executive job. And she said she wanted to leave and become my manager. And so she left. Universal MCA. She left to manage me.
That's a pretty big investment. That's a pretty big honor.
And I was her only client.
Wow. I bet you both were very formidable walking into a room.
Oh, I never felt I was formidable, but she was scary. She was. I never thought of myself as formidable. I'd like someone to see me that way in a character or something, but I don't think socially I'm ever formidable. I'm shy. You never know it by how much I'm talking, but I am shy.
So your last show under the contract was House Calls.
It was. Thank you. It's so nice when very adept interviewers actually do their homework. Then we have such a good time. Anyway, thank you. Yes, I left after House Calls. The studio system ended after I'd been there 10 years. All the actors left. And they held me back. Monique said, "Why are you doing this? Let her go. She could make some money, this Laura Dojo making it at the studio." And they said, "Because we want her to do House Calls, to replace Lynn Redgrave." Can you imagine? And Monique said, "Well, then make her a contract, make her a series deal instead of an exclusive contract. At least she could make a little dough." So they said, "All right." So, and I stayed at Universal, but I stepped into House Calls with Wayne Rogers.
And
trying to replace Lynn Redgrave, if you can imagine.
Yes, you talk about that in your book, and it's some great stories. That section of the book.
Yes,
great stories throughout the book.
Yes,
really great stories. But in any event, yeah, the contract system has always been very interesting and intriguing, and on some level, I'm not sure if they had the option, if the studios wouldn't want to have it back because of the financial constraints that it provides to them. But
I think it's expensive for studios because we got paid every week, whether we worked or not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I was paid $186 a week. And I would have paid them. I would have. People would say to me, "Don't sign that contract to Universal. You'll never be heard from again." I said, "Nobody's ever heard me now." It hurts. And I did the right thing. Being a contract player had its drawbacks. The producers on the lot resented hiring contract players. They had some sweet blonde off the lot that they wanted to come in and play the role. But they were, shall we say, encouraged to read the contract players,
Mm-hmm.
That's a Monique James line. They were encouraged to see us. They did not have to hire us. The only thing we got is we got the sides, meaning that scene, the night before, so we could rehearse it the night before instead of walking in and doing what used to be called a cold reading, where you're handed the script and you were given like 10 or 15 minutes to look at it, and then you go in and you read for it. Well, as a contract player, she'd get it to my house. all of the contract players got the scene sent to their house the night before, so you could prep. But that was solely the only advantage. Except you got to hang out at the Westmore makeup building, and Edith Head had her own design studio there. So you surrounded with the best in business. It doesn't mean you got to hang with them, but you were surrounded by them.
You could see them across the commissary.
Yes. And Edith Head once stressed me.
Ooh.
I was just going to ask you that. Tell us about that.
Yes,
That's
please.
Melissa jumping in. She can't help herself.
It's only because of Monique James. Every contract player on the lot got to be in Airport 75.
Oh, wow.
And the reason we got to be in Airport 75, we were stewards or stewardesses. And they just paid, if we worked, we got to make $206 a week. But we were never allowed to speak. If we spoke, then they'd have to, give us more. But every contract player was made a steward or a stewardess in Airport 75, given our little pittance. We didn't care. I started a Monopoly game on the set because I'd never done a feature before. It takes 5 hours to light a scene. Television, it's fast, but in features, it's huge. So I started this Monopoly game going, and Edith Head did the stewardesses' outfits. And apparently, Monique had gone to Edith and said, Edith, look, I've got someone who's one of the stewards. Let's just do something to make her look a little different. So we all showed up in front of Edith Head with camel-colored A-line skirts, camel-colored heels, beige hose, burgundy turtleneck sweaters, and a scarf around our neck. Very stewardess, right? And she looked at all this and she said, Sharon Gless. I said, yes, Miss Head. She said, come with me. She took me back to the dressing room and she said, take off that skirt. Okay. I took it off. And she had trousers, the exact same color, same gabardine, same everything. She said, put these trousers on. Okay. She said, all right, I like it. She said, take that thing off around your neck. I said, okay. And she said, pull your hair back in a ponytail at the nape of your neck. Get the hair off your face. I said, okay. And she says, let me wrap this around your back. So I ended up being in trousers, no blonde hair hanging down, just pulled back with that scarf, no silly scarf around my neck. I was very tailored, which was my style. But she saw it. And all she did was do that switcheroo, and it was the only stewardess who looked like that.
That's amazing. I love Monique for doing that. I love her,
I know. And then she asked them if I could have a close-up with Karen Black, who was the female lead of the show. And so I had a close-up, a 2-shot with her. So embarrassing. Anyway, but I just stood there looking stupid. And then I got a job while I was on that movie. Monique had me reading for a miniseries, and I got it. And I got the miniseries after 4 readings. And I got a miniseries called, is it Centennial?
I was going to ask if it was Centennial.
Centennial, right.
Yes.
A period piece.
Yeah, because we also spoke with Stephanie Zimbalist, and she was in Centennial.
Oh, no. It wasn't Centennial, but of course she wasn't Centennial. No, it was The Immigrants, and I was the female lead.
So that must have been one of your breakout roles then.
It was. And Stephen Mock, who played the immigrant, it ended up being my lover on Cagney many, many years later.
I love how many people have worked on Cagney and Lacey. Mm-hmm. Like almost everybody that we talked to or we're looking at to talk to have done something on Cagney and Lacey because it ran for so long, and in particular had a lot of ladies up in the writing and directing. So I will shout out Barney for that.
Yes, we had a female director. We had Karen. You're going to be talking to Karen, right?
Yes.
Karen Arthur?
Yeah, I'll tell you the numbers. Do you want to know the numbers on Cagney and Lacey? Because we like to do the numbers on the shows we cover and how many women were sort of behind the camera.
Yes.
And Cagney and Lacey is, by the way, off the charts. We've only looked at really closely at 3 shows so far. But out of 42 directors listed on IMDb, 13 were female directors. That's 31%. It's way higher than anybody else in the 80s, as far as we know so far. Like, significant. So shout out to Barney and the whole team for that.
You did it. As I say, I gained all the knowledge and the experience and all the things I didn't know about feminism because of that show. I was exposed to that fight which women had to do. I was so protected at Universal. I never starred with another woman. I learned nothing about the female struggle in our industry and in the world until I did Cagney Lacey.
And so was there a moment? Was there a moment, whether you were doing publicity or someone came up to you or during the show, that you went,
Has somebody told you this story?
No!
About me politically and publicity?
No.
Okay, I'm going to give you a story.
Oh, fantastic.
My publicist on Cagney Lacey was a wonderful woman named Pat Kingsley. And Pat said, Sharon, we're going to be doing public service announcements for you to encourage women to register to vote. I said, great. I said, I should really get registered. God, I swear to God. And here's Tyne's been out there, I'm going to be registered. Barney says to Pat, I think Sharon, Barney's serious, I think Sharon is interested in getting more politically involved. He said, that means she's considering getting registered. I'm so ashamed to tell these stories, but I have come a long way.
It was not handed to women. I was raised by a mom who worked, and, she was a single mom of 2 daughters, and she was a scientist. She worked for CDC in Atlanta. And that was like, she never talked about it. She wouldn't have called herself a feminist, but my sister and I both grew up going, like, knowing about it. And then from my sister, who was older than me, that she trained me up pretty quick too, because she was off to college before me. And it was the time of Gloria Steinem, and it was out there. But I think unless you had a world in which you're watching your mom not be able to buy a house, even though she has a great job, because the bank wouldn't loan her money, I was like, that doesn't seem right. You're just like, But I think unless you had an excuse or a reason, or were growing up in that and handed that, a lot of women weren't handed that.
No,
weren't handed that they were up against a wall. They just didn't know it.
Yeah. I think I had a credit card when most women didn't have a credit card because your husband could have a credit card.
Yeah.
But I had a credit card, I think, long before most women did. I don't know how I got them because I didn't get married till I was 50. There were just all kinds of things I took for granted. I didn't know how bad it was until I was lucky enough to get Cagney Lacey. I'm so blessed. And I didn't even know, I'll tell you the story of me being a book, but Tyne and I were invited to march on Washington during the Young Bush. And there we were in the front row carrying the banner with thousands of women behind us. And Whoopi Goldberg was there and Gloria Steinem. We were in the front row carrying this thing, and maybe hundreds of thousands of women and maybe 5 men. One of them was Barney Rosenzweig. Anyway, we were taken on this stage. It's the stage where far, far away is the Washington Monument. Okay, That's where we were. I didn't have any idea what we were doing or the impact that Cagney Lacey had is really what I'm trying to say to you. And Gloria came to me and said, go out there. I said, go out there. Look at Tyne. She said, go out there, Sharon. I said, what do I say? My dialogue had not been written for me. What do I say? She said, just go out there. Tyne, go there. So I remember I walked out to this, and Tyne followed me. They were crazy. They started screaming and clapping. And tens of thousands of them. And I didn't know why. And it was because of what we had done. And I didn't know the impact we were having. I got it then. We didn't have mics, so I just waved. Said thank you. You know, we were off stage and everything, but I hope you understand the moment I'm describing to you.
I do. You're making me cry.
And you know, it's everybody's used to having access to everything now, and then it was not.
Yeah, but I didn't know.
Yeah, you were working.
Tell me about us.
Yeah, you were working how many hours a week, and you know how many weeks a year making this television show, and there was no social media, there was no internet. It's totally understandable.
And I didn't even know it. How could I say to them, thank you? I didn't have Mike, but Gloria, you know, she knew exactly what she was doing. And I was surprised they recognized us. Bob and Burnett walked out on this stage with, people were miles back at the Washington Monument, you know, like it was the president inauguration. I mean, it was, anyway, that was the way I learned that we had impact. I was given the gift of playing that part. And the whole time I was doing it, I never knew that I was giving a gift. I was just lucky. I knew I was giving the gift of, it's okay to say you're an alcoholic. It's okay, come on. I knew that was a rough one. And no one had ever done that before. No female had ever done that before, in character. And then me in real life. But then, I don't even know how I got on this, except...
Well, we were talking about, was there a moment? And I think that was the moment where you went, oh, I'm doing more than just playing a character on a TV show. Did you end up carrying that back to the show with you? Like, did you feel like, oh boy, we better be careful now? Like, I don't know if you felt that responsibility when you were doing it, or were you able to set that aside?
I always felt a responsibility as an actor to do the finest job I could. I never carried the responsibility of I have to represent women properly. I guess through my performance, I did. She was a difficult character. She, Mary Beth Lacey, rolled down her sleeves and straightened her bow and everything. She'd go see the lieutenant. And I was always, whatever. Cagney always had this act, She had Drake. She was going to be the first female police commissioner, and it didn't follow the rules. And no, I never knew that I was giving women permission to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Go get a job where there are no women, if that's what you want. Because there were no women in the police business when Tyne and I were in it. No partners ever. Never female partners.
Yeah, and no female work friendship on television.
No!
Like that was that, and even now it's rare. We were talking about the show, like, obviously Rizzoli Isles and shows that are kind of clearly following in the footsteps. There's also friendship shows, Sex and the City, things like that now. But at the same time, it was so that I do remember, watching it and just the normalcy of two women having a conversation about both work and their personal feelings about that work.
Right. Susan, Cagney and Lacey were not friends.
Mm-hmm. They
were not friends. They could have been more socially different. Cagney got children. Mary had her husband, her children. Cagney was sleeping around. And Cagney was ambitious. Mary Beth wasn't ambitious. She wanted to put in her 20 and get the retirement fund to help her family. That's who she was. She was a great cop. Mary Beth Lacey was. But they were never friends. But their lives depended on each other. Their lives depended on each other. They were partners. But they were never friends. They didn't socialize with each other. She'd be so bored going over there and pretending she was playing with the children. she did it sometimes, Cagney, but Barney used to say, in a fairer world, those two women could have worked at the post office.
Yeah.
Didn't matter because they weren't pals. He said the police situation was better because their lives were at stake. It was more interesting.
Yeah, more dramatic. Immediately
But
dramatic.
they were pals. Now, Tyne Daly and I today are best friends. We weren't when we were shooting the show, not because we didn't love each other and more so respect each other. But we didn't have time to be pals. There was no time.
It was a lot of long hours.
Horse around after work. She had children she was trying to raise, and she'd be getting home at midnight,
Mm-hmm.
But we supported each other.
Yeah. You were partners.
For catty stuff. A lot of the press tried to say, oh, they're so catty, they don't get along. It's totally and we're much better friends today.
Yes. She said that you were competitive with her.
I am? For what?
For coming on. When I said you were coming on the show, she said she's so competitive.
Oh, well, I'm equally happy to be invited.
Yes, we're very happy to have you. And I love that. Again, Sharon and I have been friends for a long time. Melissa and I have been friends for a long time. And that ability to be able to sort of work with your friends and create with your friends is pretty special.
But one of the things, I think I got subliminally more than with direct knowledge at the time and watching Cagney and Lacey is the idea that these were two professional women. They were two very different people, but it showed that you didn't have to be a certain way to do this job. You didn't have to be a certain type of woman to be a police officer or to be a feminist. It just had to do with, are you competent? Can you get the job done? And it's something I, to this day, really appreciate about the show.
Sharon, I don't remember our ever discussing feminism on the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was not part of what we talked about. I guess we were showing, hey, it can be done. It can happen. Come on.
Yeah.
And we never talked about, I don't ever remember even talking about, the guys are getting better than we are. And we didn't pound that stick. We just did it.
There may have been some areas where it's sort of, for lack of a better word, indirectly infiltrated into the storytelling. I'm thinking in particular about the episode where there was another cop who was physically abusing his wife, and the two of you were like, do we bring this up? Because it was more about, we're all cops, and how do we deal with that? Because that's sensitive as opposed to, I think, anything else initially. But the goal for the two of you was always find the person who committed the crime and see to it that the justice system punishes them. That's what your goal was.
And we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to depend on these guys.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and we can do it.
Yeah, it was
all Jane the John. I'm sure Tyne brought that up because that's the only place we could, as two women, talk alone because we were a minority.
Yeah, and I love. It was so interesting how they brought you on the show. And if we can talk about it, you came on, you were the third Cagney. I don't know if you felt pressure or what you felt.
Well, I was asked first. So that sort of gave me a little bit of an ego about it. And I, of course, turned it down. And Barney said, actors are not always the best judges of material. So it went to Loretta Swit. And then it went to a series at the time Loretta did it. And Loretta had to go back to MASH. So Barney approached me again. And I couldn't do it because I was going to do house calls. So Loretta came in and did it.
Meg Foster came in and did it for the show. Yeah, Meg Foster.
Excuse me. Yes, Meg Foster, a wonderful, wonderful actress, came in and did it. And the network didn't care for the pairing. Thought there wasn't enough contrast. So Meg sadly was replaced because Tyne loved Meg. So you can imagine, here I come, the third Cagney, and Tyne and Barney invites me again. And do you know this story? my attention by going to New York to find out if house calls was.
He did tell that story. He told the story that he knew, and I felt like it was such a producer moment. It was such a producer. I know. I have a piece of information that I get to pull out.
I was in house calls, right? So we flies to New York.
Yes.
To find out if house calls is on the schedule for the next year. He finds out it isn't, so he calls my manager. She says, "I'm sorry, Barney, dear. I told you, Sharon's in house calls." And he said, "That means he's in house calls. He's got her expired." So
that is such a producer moment. I know. I have a piece of information and I'm going to use it to get what I want.
Yeah. So anyway, it did all work out finally. Tyne came right to this house. I invited her because we had billing we had to talk about. And that's that story. But and we sat right in this house and she brought champagne. And we agreed we really liked each other, liked one another. We worked out the billing and the rest is history. I was very fortunate and very blessed to work with her.
And I do love that the episode that, the first episode of the second season, where it's the two of you, it's a big conflict. Like you start right off in conflict a little bit as Mary Beth and Christine, because I think it's the one where there's been a shooting and which of you saw a gun or if you're going to back up another cop. And it was just so interesting.
Yes.
That it was such a great way, but it felt like the deep end. Felt like you guys jumped into the deep end of those characters and that show.
Right. That scene is used quite often to talk about the series. The scene of where Mary Beth and I fight. She says, "I saw what I saw," and you tell me you saw it. And yeah. I remember now. I wanted her to back me up.
Yeah. And it's it's so amazing. First, as just your first episode, it wasn't like, oh, we'll just be solving a crime together. It was very character driven. It was very much about the two of your relationship. And it was also allowing women to be mad at each other in a very real way, allowing women to be mad and angry and express that anger, and then also find ground. Kind of rebuild the relationship within that show.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it should be groundbreaking, but I could not point you to another show of that time that truly did that. In comedies, there'd be a lot of, like Golden Girls had a lot of conflict and then resolution, but
brilliantly did it. Yeah.
Yes, but in terms of drama.
Did Barney ever talk to you about how Cagney sort of came to be born in character?
No.
Because I challenged something.
Oh, well, you write a little bit in your book when you realized who Cagney was. But tell this story. I don't know.
We were in our boss's office with all the men, with all the male cops also, all our people in our precinct. And I can't remember why we were in there. But Mary Beth, as I said, always buttoned up. Wrote out her seasons, always very proper. And she says, "Lieutenant, if you don't know the difference between rape and romance," he was talking about Gone with the Wind.
Yes. And I think you guys were working on a rape case or something in the,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And he was saying, but in Gone with the Wind, he carries her up. Well, he did rape her. He did rape her. But it was made to me very sexy,
yes.
know. Now she wakes up that exploding with a smile on her face. Anyway, Mary Beth Lacey's line is, "Well, Lieutenant, if you don't know the difference in rape and romance, you've got a problem." She walks out, and that's very unlike Mary Beth. So as it's written, everything's quiet. Oh, as it's written, one of the guys, probably is Becky, and what is it with her? Time of the month or something? And I stopped the scene. And the director says, "What's wrong?" I said, "I need a line. I need a line, guys." I mean, he doesn't get to say that. It's our partner. So we're never allowed to change a line. So they called Barney Rosenzweig down and said, Barney always looked at his watch, always said, "What seems to be the problem?" It's always what seems to be the problem. I said, I need a line. I need a line here. This Becky just said about Mary Beth. What is it? Her time of the month or something? I said, I need to get a better line to get back at it. He said, no, you don't get any line at all. I said, I'm talking about. He said, you're Cagney. I said, no, I'm Cagney. He said, come over here. Takes me aside. He said, this is a lesson for you, learning the character you are playing. She doesn't give a shit about defending her partner. She's one of the boys. She plays poker with him at night. She wants to be one of the boys, and she's going to swallow it. She's going to let them say that about her partner and not open her mouth. And I remember I said, oh, I get it. She's a coos, didn't she? That's another word for I said, she's a coos, isn't she? And I smiled. At least I understood when he said she got it. So she is. She loves her partner, but she wants to be one of the boys.
Because she wants to be lieutenant.
Yeah. So she was willing to betray her own sex to stay in the poker game.
I mean, I kept my mouth shut in the 80s as a young person in a work environment.
Did you? I don't know if I did. I'm sure I did. I wasn't part of, I was very gratefully, may I say, I was never part of the Me Too. I never had that problem. Now that men didn't find me attractive. Or they didn't hit on me because I had Minnie James right there in her office. And I'd have told. Or they didn't have anything I needed. There was nothing they had I wanted. And I think they knew that. So I never had that unfortunate time in my career where I got hit on and my career threatened play. Yeah. So write my book, perhaps I just wasn't very attractive.
No. I think you were being protected by Monique.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No one dare.
Yeah.
In your book also, if I'm remembering correctly, you mentioned that when you were cast as Cagney, that you and Tyne spent some time together working on your dynamic between the two of you, working on, separate from when you're on stage, working some things out that way. I just wondered if you might expand on that a little bit.
We did. The day before we read together with the cast, very, very first time I had ever stepped in to play this role, and there was a read-through in front of the cinematographer, in front of some of the key crew, in front of course, all the cast, and executives from Orion. I mean, oh God, because this is the last chance, right? Tyne calls me up. She said, what do you say we run this script alone together before they ever see us do it? I said, great. Do you mind? She said, no. So she comes over with a bottle of champagne again. And we run together. It turned out 5 times we did it together. I'm so grateful to her because when you're the new person, you don't want to bother anybody. So we went and we sat at the table with all these people, and we did it. And Barney stood up and said, and ladies and gentlemen, that's how it's done.
Nice.
It makes me cry because Tyne came up with just the necessity, of course, of us doing it together and not arriving green. She had the advantage of playing this character for quite a while, but she knew I had not.
Yeah.
And yeah. And what you might be referring to also, Sharon, is our working together every night at shoot. We met in my trailer because I had the bar open. So we met in my trailer and read the next days were over and over again until we thought each other's rhythms.
That's fantastic.
And that pays off in the show. It's there really is such a camaraderie that comes across in the show. It really does feel like you guys are working partners because you were.
We were. And I will always say, certainly I have my own skill. I brought something to that character that they didn't have before. But Tyne Daly is the reason. Tyne is such a generous actor. Anything I wanted to do, she didn't care. And she'd respond, and we were kind of a hoot together.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think we are already planning to basically have you back on the show together, because that's my goal.
I just played cards with her. I had a birthday poker game last night.
Oh, nice.
Well, your birthday? Happy birthday.
No, I'm saying my birthday was the last day of May, but I like to play with some friends and my stepdaughters, and Tyne's always included. So he did our game last night.
Oh, that's great.
I lost.
Oh, you lost. All right.
And so did Tyne. Okay.
Okay. All right. So there you go. See, that's okay. I'm curious if Christine Cagney would have called herself a feminist.
In those very early days, yes, I think she would have, but I don't think she would have understood the real meaning of a feminist. I think she was a feminist for herself. She wasn't going to let anybody say, because she's a girl, she can't have it. But was she a feminist to fight for other women? No. I think at that time, Cagney fought for herself. I think she was a blowhard. I tell in the book a story, but I'm going to tell it to you too. That I went to Tyne when I first took over this character, and I totally was getting who she was, who I thought she was. And I said to Tyne, I have something to ask of you. She said, what is it? Sure. And I said, we're always running indoors, with guns drawn. I said, can I run in before you? She said, you know why I want to say no to this question. So of course I do. So I'm asking it. I said, Tyne, I think Mary Beth has a lot to lose. She has a husband, she has children. This one doesn't give a shit about anybody. She wants to be the hot shot. That's who she is. And sometimes twofold. And I don't think she's as cautious. She wants to win. And tried to listen to me. And she said, I get it. If that's what you need. I said, I don't mean every time, but most of the time. Our routine. She said, okay. Well, guess who won all the Emmys? Tyne Daly did.
That show lives or dies on that relationship, and that's why it lived so long, yes. and so long in our hearts. I'm not wearing it today, but I have a Cagney Lacey shirt because I have shirts of all the shows, and I was in the grocery store the other day and wearing it, and 3 different people came up to me, and they're just like, "Oh, I love that show. Oh, Cagney Lacey. Oh, like, it has so much resonance, that show. People do remember it." I want to take a break real quick. We'll come right back, and we won't do all our questions because I'm not sure we'll be able to get through them all. But
I don't want to embarrass myself like Barney did. Do 4 hours. I mean, come on.
Barney was very sweet.
He was very sweet.
He loves it. Are you kidding? He loves it.
It was fascinating. It was fascinating and interesting and fun.
We'll come right back. Hello, welcome back. Carole King did the theme song for the Trials of Rosie O'Neill.
And
then you had her on the show in a great episode, the reunion episode.
The song. Her manager at the time did not want her to sing on TV. So we got wonderful
Melissa Manchester?
Manchester.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. But I got to go the day that there was Carole King and Melissa Manchester together.
Wow.
Singing, and she's singing the song. Carol's watching, of course, because it's her song. And Melissa's singing it beautifully. And I'm just watching. And then they took a picture of the 3 of us together, which was cool to me. Yes, Carole wrote the song. Barney approached her and asked her if she would write the main theme for the Trials of Rosie O'Neill. And she said she'd love to. And then he asked her if she'd sing it, and she told me that her manager did not want her singing anything for a TV series. I think she felt very apologetic about it. So we got Melissa Manchester. But on the show, Carol told Barney that she's always wanted to act. So Carol did come and perform as a character on our show. And it was a reunion of everybody was it college or high school?
High school.
High school, right. And Carol was one of, our besties, our bestest friends. And Tyne arrives also as one of our high school alumni. And she's a Tony winner from Broadway. And Tyne had just won her Tony on Broadway. So she played it to the hilt. And
she's very diva in that episode.
Very diva, exactly. And makes everybody hate her. And but we have a wonderful scene together at the end where the characters settle in each other. But to sit there and sing with Carole King while she's playing on the piano her song, and she's singing it, the graduates are singing it with her. Sometimes you just take things for granted when they're happening. I know it's a very key highlight in my life.
It was a beautiful, that episode was really great, and it was a beautiful scene. And it took me forever to recognize Gretchen Corbett.
I know. Gretchen was a contract player with me.
Oh, was she? Okay. All right. So I have questions. A lot of these questions are from my husband because he's a huge Rockford Files fan and thus a huge Gretchen Corbett fan. And he's a television writer and producer. And I literally took a picture of the reunion scene and sent it to him.
Oh, Carol's down there. Oh,
Carol's down there. Yeah.
So cool.
And I said, okay, you have to pick out who all these people are. And he recognized everybody but Gretchen Corbett. And I said, and when I said it was Gretchen Corbett, he was like, I don't believe that.
We're in a contract together. And she did like a recurring role on Rockford.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And you were on Rockford. You did 2 episodes of Rockford Files.
Yeah.
And one was playing a stewardess.
It was great.
It was called The Fourth Man.
I don't remember. That was my first one. Was where I think I was playing the stewardess.
And I'm excited about it because it was written by Juanita Bartlett, who is
Juanita.
Can you please tell us about Juanita Bartlett?
I don't know who she is now. She moved to Carmel.
She passed away a number of years ago, but
she moved to Carmel. I know that, and sort of retired there.
Yes.
But didn't she write with that wonderful writer?
She wrote on the Rockford Files for many years, and she was a producer and writer on Scarecrow Mrs. King, one of the other shows that we cover from the 80s.
Stephen Cannell.
Yes.
Not Stephen Cannell.
Stephen Cannell, David Chase.
Yes.
Stephen Bochco, Stephen Cannell.
For all of them. In fact, Stephen Cannell used to call me his good luck charm. He put me in all his pilots.
Oh.
Small part. I did a pilot for him where I was like one of the leads. And then he put me in that Baba Black Sheep where it was, gave me one scene in his pilot, and it sold. Not because of me, but he just thought, you're going to be my good luck charm. I'm always going to put you, do a little something in my pilots.
That was the Black Sheep Squadron.
Yes. I used to.
Yeah, that's good. You really know your stuff.
Oh, we grew up on television.
Watched a lot of TV. Still watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I remember that actor. I don't remember his name, but he used to do...
Robert Conrad.
Used to do those battery commercials.
Battery commercials.
Knock it off my shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, all those guys. But they were all around at Juanita Bartlett's.
Yeah.
We were all at Universal. Stephen Bochco eventually left Universal and went on to, greatness. But Stephen Cannell, we sort of knew each other socially. We were both born in L.A. He was a native Angelino, just like I was, from Pasadena. And I was from Hancock Park, and he died way too young.
Yeah.
Anyway.
His daughter makes television. I believe she's a director, some kind of television creator.
Right?
Yeah.
That's right. I believe I worked with her. I think Barney hired her maybe it wasn't Barney, maybe it was on like, it was one of my other series after that. And she came and directed us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I do love it. Does feel like you guys are always inviting the family back. I believe Meg Foster does a guest on Trials of Rosie O'Neill.
Yes, Bob had her often play my opposing attorney because he felt so badly at the networks really forcing him to do that. And he always loved her, So yeah, she came and did some wonderful turns for us on the Trials of Rosie O'Neill.
Okay, I have a couple questions, just like about the opening sequence for Cagney and Lacey, in particular, the shot walking down the sidewalk in New York of you two together. That's so sort of iconic for the show.
Just met.
And so you guys went to New York to shoot that.
Right. Once a year, we would go to New York to shoot exteriors. And they would just cut into episodes. I mean, we'd shoot them speaking, doing dialogue. And I said, well, wait a minute, what happened before this scene? Because, an actor needs an antecedent event, so you know why you're crossing the street. So the writers would give us our scenes and then tell us just what happened just before that scene. So we used to love going there. We always went there in, I think, August. Hot, so hot. We wore hot, cool clothes. We were walking down the street. Well, then you come to later on in the year and you do that scene, the preceding it, and you have to get back in those clothes. Well, we've been eating the craft service all year. We couldn't get back into the clothes we'd established. Every year we had this problem. So finally they started putting us, even the heat of August in New York, they'd put us in coats and hats and stuff. So time for us to duplicate that scene or walking, we could take off that. We could have bigger clothes.
That's so funny. Do you remember doing that, walking down that shot? That's clearly a long lens. You're walking with real people, I assume.
Yes, I did something that was not in the script. I was told to do, but it just seemed right. We did many walking down the streets. And I decided, well, Cagney likes clothes. So even though we're kind of managed clothes, but she liked to style, And so I said, I'm going to go look and see what's in the window. So I just stopped. And Tyne wondered, where'd she go? And without her ever planning this, and she goes back and gets me and pulls me by the arm. And then staying in is one of the parts of the main title.
Oh, that's great. I know exactly what your shot you're talking about. That's so great. And then I, of course, have a question about the flasher.
What was I saying?
Yes.
I don't know. What I'd like is really just get a lip reader. I'm serious.
And figure out what you were, because you don't remember what you were saying.
Well, I'm saying, because I've never been able to answer the question, but the attitude I could tell was really, or what we hoping to do with that. That was my intention. And I knew we weren't mic'd, so it didn't matter.
Right. But again, that opening sequence, very, very lovely. And that flasher shot in particular has stayed with me from childhood because of your look, right? Because of your look.
Thank you. Well, my goodness, thank you.
And thinking about it, it's actually a little surprising that CBS let them put that in, because it seems a little, for lack of a better, risque for a network television show to put that kind of shot in. But good, kudos to them.
They were a little more lenient with us. At one read through, Marty Cove had can I say anything or whatever?
Yeah.
You can cut it out.
Yeah.
So one read through, and this is in the script, Marty Cove has a line like saying, well, she's a, and I raised my hand. I said, excuse me, excuse me, Barney, can we see on television? He said, no, but I'm going to trade it in for another word I do want to use. That's why he put it in the script. Seems bushy.
Again, just a classic producer move, right?
Yep,
like I'm going to push it too far and then I'll give you some ground.
Yeah. All right, I won't say it. Then yes.
I do also want to, I have questions about Queer as Folk and how you got involved with that. And again, it feels like a show that may have brought you to another level of awareness and activism, according to your book.
Very much so. Queer as Folk, I was in Chicago doing a play, and my television career was slow. It was slowing down. I'd gotten very, very, very heavy. I'd hit like 200 pounds. And my marriage was falling apart. Because of that, everything was falling apart. Anyway, so I was doing this play that had been written for me. So I thought, well, I'm not so busy. I'll go and do this play. Well, while I was there, I got an offer to do Lion in Winter back east in summer for a summer playhouse thing. So I hired the top drama coach in Chicago to train me. And the man who was my trainer was also an agent. And he called me one day and he said, do you know about Queer as Folk? And I said, no. He said, well, it's a British series and it's not been shown here. And there's a black market copy. Showtime, he said, has bought the rights to do the American version. And there's a black market copy going around. Really? He said, yeah. And there's a part that's perfect for you. Let me have a car, send it over, stay right where you are. And I said, okay. So I stayed in my little apartment and the driver comes, kitchen and script, so I'm not so busy. I sit down and I read it. Well, I read that role of Debbie Novotny and I knew this was my next show. If they take me, I knew I was perfect for her. And I'd never been aggressive on my own behalf ever. So I pick up the phone and I call Showtime, the network, because Barney's ex-assistant is now the assistant to the president of Showtime. So I say, Carol, Sharon, hi. I just read Queer as Folk, which you guys are making. I said, I want the part of the mother. She said, you don't want the part of the mother. There's another mother that is very young. And I said, I do. Anyway, I just figured out that I was talking about Debbie Novotny. I said, I do want the part of Sharon. She said, you don't want to be in the show. It's in Canada. I said, perfect. Because Barney and I were going through the divorce, and she said, there's no money. I said, I don't care. I want it out. I want it out of the country. I wanted my own series again. I just wanted the things I loved, So she said, well, let me run it by Jerry. They're doing casting today, casting meetings, talking about. Anyway, Jerry Offsay gets on the phone. He said, Sharon, Jerry Offsay, I like the idea. I said, oh, Jerry, I'm so glad. He said, yeah. He says, I think you'll bring a little class to the project. I said, Jerry, class is not what I have. And I don't know if you know the role of Debbie Novotny, but she was not a classy woman. And so anyway, he flew me out to meet the two producers. He said, as far as I'm concerned, you have the job, but I don't want to run roughshod over my producers. Would you mind meeting them? We'll pay to fly you out. I said, not at all. So I flew out and I met them, and it was the most fun meeting. We laughed the whole time, and they gave me the role in the room.
That's
and
so
read for it. I mean, I'm so happy because I knew I could bring something to it, and I knew I was right for her. Debbie Novotny was kind of crude looking with the red hair and the thing and the red wig. I mean, it was all, their earrings and I played her with my mother's heart. My mother is the most refined woman. Absolutely. If you ever think of the word lady, my mother never raised her voice. Never said a swear word. Once she said D-A-M-N. She spelled a swear word. And I said, but I know my mother's heart. And I totally played it with Maria's heart. I allowed myself, I made up that look. because I didn't want to be the blonde, the 200-pound blonde. What, Christine Cagney gone bad. So I thought, well, now's my chance to be somebody else and look different and act different. And so that's a long answer to tell us about Queer Folk.
It's a great answer.
But I also learned so much. And I am one of these people who, my best friends are gay. But until Queer as Folk, I didn't know the real struggles, the hardship, the heartache, all of the stuff that you didn't hear about until that show. And I learned. And then boys would walk down the street and come over and say, may I have a hug? And they'd start crying. It just was a wonderful, I was able to have impact again, a different kind of impact, but I was able to have impact on some people.
You truly did. Our marketing person who's not here today is Sullivan, and he is a young gay Black man who watched your show watched that show and was like, she was the mom that we all wanted. She was the mom we didn't have.
She had such a mouth on her. And she'd slap her son across the face.
But she loved and accepted him and everybody around him.
Adored him. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If anyone was going to hurt him, she was there.
Yeah, I love the show, too. I mean, this straight Black woman absolutely loved the show. Loved Debbie, loved how loving she was, not just to her son, but all of his friends and the whole community. And you were so wonderful in it. It was really great. Loved it.
I lucked out. I just lucked out. Thank you so much, because it was...
And sometimes it pays to raise your hand and say, I want.
I like that part.
Yeah.
I've never done that in my life. And there it was. And it changed my life, brought me back.
I mean, what a great, yeah. This is the third time. Sharon Gless made me cry 3 times today.
Oh, God. Sorry.
But for all the best reasons.
Oh, exactly.
Thank you so much. It was that I've stayed closest to that cast than even Cagney Lacey. Tyne and I are inseparable. But the rest of the cast, we worked so many hours, we didn't get a chance to know them or play with them. We didn't get a chance to hang out.
And then Burn Notice, you play a completely different and yet adoring mom again.
And I want to tell you something. I never wanted to play the mother. Play the mother and snore. But these two particular mothers were fun. I refer to the mother in Burn Notice as the mother from hell. I loved her. And Jeffrey Donovan and I got along so well. And it was just an end. Worked out. Anyway, we finally stopped divorce proceedings, way after Queer as Folk. And then this Burn Notice was in Miami, which is where I lived. And I didn't tell them I lived there because I have a home in LA. Because I wanted to, during the pilot, I wanted to hang out with the cast in the hotel, And I wanted to get per diem. It's sold. Like months later, my manager called me and he said, Burn Notice sold. I said, what's Burn Notice? It was a very odd title, so I didn't remember it. I did 1 day's work, 2 days work. That was it. And then I went home and then he calls me months later, Burn Notice sold. Ooh, now I have to tell him I live in Miami. Because they're going to want to deliver the scripts and stuff, So I confessed.
You confessed, and you didn't get...
Always. I said it fair.
You didn't get per diem for the entire series?
No. And I did. I wanted to listen to the pilot. I just wanted to hang out with the actors in the hotel. None of us had housing.
Yeah.
Well, I do. So, anyway, it's been a wonderful, and I've stayed friends with those actors.
And so so you and Barney were at the brink of divorce for a while.
Yeah. Very serious. Yeah. And then we just lived long enough to say, oh, well. No, it was very, very rough times.
what is it? Eugenia Ross Leving said, we had her on for Scarecrow as a King, and she said, she's had a writing partner her entire career, Brad Buckner, and she's like, that's my best relationship. My marriage is hard.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. Hardest relationships. Well, obviously, too, it's much easier for me to play the character than play myself. So, when I'm playing in a series, great. They can't hurt me. But he could and did, and I'm sure I did my share. So now we've been married 31 years.
That's amazing. Who'd have thunk?
Never thunk it.
And you didn't think you'd ever be married?
Never. I never wanted to be married. Never, ever. I'd never seen a good marriage. Still, very few. I don't know if it's a natural state. But I was single for so many years. I didn't get married till I was just about to turn 50. And I liked me, I got along fine with me. But I got married at almost 50, and then I went into menopause. Well, poor thing, poor Barney, he didn't know it either.
None of us do.
Really.
You lay a lot of stuff bare in your book.
I see. I do, but I couldn't do it any other way, or I wasn't ever trying to go for sensationalism. I just told the truth.
Yeah.
I came up with the title before I ever put a word on the page. Apparently, there were ways.
And why is it titled that?
Well, I came up with that expression. I was in Hazleton, so a lot of the book's about my alcohol and drug abuse. I know, get in line. But it was the 80s. It's recently been written, but I do write quite a bit about the 80s. I write about all the complaints about my life. But when I was in Hazleton, there was a lot of scandal. And Barney was going through a divorce. The press was terrible to us because we were very hot at that time. And this was our secret. And we had fallen in love with each other, and we knew it was wrong, and we couldn't help it, and we kept it a secret from Tyne for a year, which is inexcusable. Because Tyne and Barney and I were a triangle. Nobody could, break us up, and this was something she didn't know about. Eventually, we told her. But it was just a horrible, horrible time. Anyway, I ended up in Hazleton, which is the harbor of the rehabs. And it was all over the press. It was awful. And Cagney certainly was the first alcoholic in a series on television. And it turns out so is Sharon. So it was a lot of his life imitating art. Was she alerted when she did those amazing scenes? And boo, boo, boo. I was not, by the way. I cannot drink and perform. I'm not that good. Timing's everything for me. So somebody approached me when I got out of Hazleton. It's a 4-week program. I was there 7 weeks. Hi. 7 weeks. They just couldn't get
you're going back to one. Back to one.
Honest to God. And I was very well known in those days. So they used to hide me. They'd hide me like every Sunday was Parents' Day to come and see whoever they loved that was in Hazleton. They hide me in the infirmary because we were saying Sharon Gless does not live here. They were trying to protect me. So this girl says, "You were in Hazleton?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What were you doing in Hazleton?" I said, "Apparently there were complaints." I always try to make light of any tragedy. And Barney happened to be standing next to me. We weren't married, but he burst out laughing. And if he bursts out laughing, I know I did something funny.
Yeah.
And it's just always been my expression. No matter what terrible thing happens, apparently there were complaints.
It's such a great line. It really is.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. It was painful at the time.
Yes. It's like, this is what we used to, when I was a kid and we watched MASH, we'd like, oh, it's like MASH. You laugh in order not to cry.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. I love that. That was a good show.
It was a great show.
Mm.
my
So
gosh.
that you have included me in this trilogy, which I believe is about to be a quartet, if we get Karen in, right?
Yes. We are right. So we are now down to 3 questions. What's the 80s ladies-driven television show that resonated with you at the time or afterwards? We usually ask guests not to name their own show, but a lot of people were busy in the 80s working on their show. So is there an 80s ladies TV show other than Cagney and Lacey that resonated with you?
No.
Okay. No?
Was there another 80s ladies television show?
No, absolutely
not like
not.
Cagney and Lacey.
I'm not being coos. I'm just, was there?
We're doing a whole podcast about them.
So when you're shooting your own show, you don't get a chance to watch other people's work. I'll tell you who my favorite ladies TV show is. Now,
Please.
Hacks.
Oh,
we love Hacks and we love Jean Smart because she was a famous lady of the 80s and designing
Yeah, she
women.
was, but I never got to see. I became friends with the two brunettes.
Delta Burke.
Delta Burke.
Yeah.
Jinx.
Delta. Yeah, Dixie Carter.
Dixie Carter.
I only knew Dixie and Delta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kofi. But I never got to know the other 2 women on the show. But so Hacks with Jean Smart is a piece of genius. And she plays a woman of her age. So it's like being in the 80s. I mean, to me, she's just a absolutely brilliant, down-to-earth broad. And the writers of that show are brilliant. And it's about a woman who is fading and doesn't want to. And if I think everything I'm learning about this show is true, she's not about to fade. She's absolutely my idol. Again, I don't watch a lot of TV, but then I got to be introduced to Jean Smart in this part.
Phenomenal. Style and substance.
And that's actually the second question. What, female-driven show of today would be your current favorite? So
Hacks.
Okay. And I think you already answered this question, which is what's like the most television or scripted moment that you've had in real life?
There was a moment in my life that I would have believed if I'd seen it in a movie. And it's in my book. It's just about my flying from Phoenix to Los Angeles. I had finally admitted for the first time in my life at age 26 that I wanted to be an actress. I never told anybody. And I'd wanted it all my life. I worked behind the camera all my life. I was a production assistant, production secretary. I was challenged. Sharon, what do you want to do with your life? You have nothing to show for it. And I said the words out loud that my step-grandma was saying, just say it. It doesn't matter if you can have it. Just say it. That must be something you want. I said, I want to be an actress. She said, so? I said, well, Mary, 26 years old, a little old, starting. And she said, when I was your age, I was under contract to MGM. I said, you were? She said, I was. I wasn't very good, so it only lasted a year. But anyway, the evening goes on, and she said she would not tell my grandfather because my grandfather disapproved. My grandfather was a very big showbiz lawyer. She promised she wouldn't tell him. Next morning, your grandfather would like to see you. He said, that's ridiculous. I earned something into his bedroom. That's ridiculous. I said, well, I knew you'd say that, Grandpa. That's why I asked Mary not to tell you. And he said, I mean, it's ridiculous. You think I'd stand in your way. I said, oh. He said, you want to be an actress? I said, yes, Grandpa. He said, so what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to take lessons. He said, great. How much are the lessons? He knew I didn't have a penny. I said, they were, I can't remember what they were. It's in my book. Let's say it was $500, but it wasn't. I think it's like $50 for 3 months. He said, you got $50. Now what? I said, Grandpa, that was so much money, you guys. You have no idea. I had nothing. And he said, so you want to go home now? I said, no, Grandpa, I came to visit you for 2 weeks. You invited me. He said, I know I did. You want to go home now? My grandfather was a thoroughbred racer. He trained thoroughbreds. He bred them and he raced them. And that day, he saw a filly who was ready to run. Now you have this money. You take this class, and what are you going to do while you're waiting to be an actress? I said, I'll get a job. I'm a secretary. He said, fine. Have Mary get you a ticket. Go home tonight. I just gotten there the day before. This moment I want to tell you about, I'm flying from Arizona into Los Angeles, my home. And I'm looking out the window. And I knew I would not fail. I knew I wasn't a looker. I knew I wasn't young. And I looked out over Los Angeles as I was landing, and I said, this is where it happens. I will not fail. And I knew I wouldn't. And a year later, I was under contract to the biggest television studio in the world. And I'd never acted in my life.
And you lasted more than a year.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is a beautiful story.
Yeah. Awesome.
And a beautiful moment.
And we just can't thank you enough for agreeing to do this and being a guest on our podcast. It's amazing. It's amazing. Been an amazing conversation.
And thank you, ladies. This was an honor. This is me being sincere. It was an honor to be on your show. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Our audiography for today is 2 websites and a book. The Sharon Gless official website is at sharongless.com, and the Facebook page is facebook.com/official Sharon Gless. The book, of course, is Apparently There Were Complaints by Sharon Gless. You can find these links on our own website, 80stvladies.com, as well as where to go watch the shows that Sharon was in.
Season 2 is right around the microphone. Tell us what 1980s female-driven television shows you think we should be talking about for our next season.
And be sure to join in for our next episode. We will be interviewing the first woman to win an Emmy for directing, Miss Karen Arthur. She won in 1985 for, you guessed it, Cagney and Lacey.
As always, we hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.